were tragic. We did not have many good times in the infantry in World War II, in those war years. For a long time, I rarely spoke about the war. 50 years, I think it was, before I really said much about it. And on the 50th anniversary of D-Day, I went back to France for the observances. And when I got home, I was asked out to speak about my experiences. And my family urged me to go and do it, and I did. And that kind of opened the door, and here I am. Now they say they can't shut me up. There aren't many left in the World War II generation, of course. And a lot of us, after having not said much for years and years, have come to the realization that as we get older, we should do something about getting our story out so that we would preserve the reality of World War II and talk about war, how it was fought, why it was fought, how it was fought, and how it was won. So that's basically my story about how I came to talk about World War II. And I think if you have relatives and friends from that era, I think if you ask them the questions, I urge you to ask them the questions, and I think you'll find that in many cases the answers will come tumbling out that have been locked in memory for all these years. I said there aren't many World War II veterans around, but actually when you stop to think of it, there are quite a few. And I ran into an old friend of mine. I live up on the North Shore, and I ran into this old friend of mine in downtown Beverly this week, and we hadn't seen each other for a long time. Last week, we hadn't seen each other for a long time, so we went into this coffee shop to reminisce. And we sat in a little booth on the side of the restaurant, and we looked around the room, and there in the booth on the other side of the room were these two old guys just like us. And I said to my friend, Charlie, that's what we're going to look like 10 years from now. Charlie said, it's a mirror, you idiot. Well, D-Day, June 6th, 1944, is a day that will live in history as a major turning point in World War II, one of the epic military engagements of all time. When the 70th anniversary 2 years ago came upon us, my family and I, 4 generations of us, went back to France and had the extraordinary opportunity to go back and to participate in the tumultuous ceremonies on Omaha Beach and in the towns that we had gone through in 1944. Then it did not seem possible that it was 70 years ago. To go back and stand on Omaha Beach on D-Day morning, 6:30 in the morning, that's when we landed. That's when we were there. It was surreal. We had a solemn ceremony on the beach. My division, by the way, was the 29th Infantry Division, and we had a delegation over there of about 50 people. Only 6 World War II vets, the rest were family and friends. So the 6 old guys were down on the beach, and the regular 29th Division Army was conducting this solemn ceremony. And at the end of it, they offered us a toast in Calvados. Calvados is a strong liqueur made right there in Normandy from apples. And pretty strong, that's quite a wallop, so you've never had a shot of Calvados at 6:30 in the morning. Recommend it to you. Change your attitude for the whole day. D-Day was a decisive battle. It was the beginning of the end for the long Nazi occupation of Western Europe. But it could have resulted in the worst Allied disaster since Pearl Harbor. Despite extraordinary courage from many soldiers, the beachhead hung in the balance for long hours. Leading up to the invasion, many military strategists thought it would be a mismatch. In fact, at one point during the morning, the Allied High Command thought the invasion was failing. I was there that fateful day so many years ago. I was a brand new second lieutenant in the 29th Infantry Division, 115th Regiment. I joined the division fresh from the United States just a few months before the invasion. I was a replacement officer. They were building up strength. Excuse me. They were building up strength for the invasion. I had been here in the United States before that, of course. I was a sergeant doing coastal defense in Oregon with an anti-aircraft battalion. And I answered a call for infantry officers as they were building up, as I say, building up their troop strength for Normandy. And I was sent to OCS at Fort Benning in Georgia. And 90 days later, I came out, an officer and a gentleman. And I was assigned to the 29th Division and sent to England, where the division had been for quite a while, some time, training on the moors and the beaches of southern England in conditions that were similar to Normandy. I was assigned a platoon in an infantry rifle company, 43 men. We had 3 10-man squads, rifle squads, and a 10-man heavy weapons squad, where we had 2 machine guns, a small mortar cannon, a bazooka, and 2 Browning automatic rifles. We had a platoon lieutenant, me, a platoon sergeant, and a radio man. The company we were in had 6 officers and 140 men, but it is questionable that any company in the 29th Division ever had exactly that number. Certainly no company in battle ever stayed at full complement very long. Our battalion called for 900 men and 28 officers, but it varied a great deal. We sent 800 in on D-Day, for example, and we were down to as low as 240 the next day. In my little platoon, 43 men, we could find 17 the next day. In the entire division, 14,000 soldiers at full strength. We had 22,000 killed or wounded, killed in action or wounded, 150% casualties, the highest of any military unit in World War II. Not a figure to point to with pride, but stark testimony to the rigors of almost a year on the front lines of Europe. We got reinforcements every single day. Young, wide-eyed soldiers in new uniforms, most with terrified looks on their faces. We never got to know most of them, wounded or killed right away. Hard to know anyone very well after D-Day. Did I tell you I was 19 on D-Day?
Is your birthday?
Pardon me?
Is your birthday?
No, it wasn't no, it wasn't that. No. I enlisted when I turned 18. I was about to be drafted anyway, so I enlisted a few days ahead of the draft board, thinking I might get a little better job if I enlisted instead of waiting till I was drafted. I was young to be a lieutenant, and it was only through a series of circumstances and good luck and breaks that I was granted a commission. We were all pretty young, actually, in the war years. I like to say that it was an age of innocence in the country. We were ordinary young men, mostly ordinary because we had led ordinary lives before the war, lives that had not been fully developed. We had grown up in the steel grip of the Great Depression. And now we were called to military service. We became conscripts in a civilian-based army, sent to France, to Normandy, to go up against a professional German army waiting on the high bluffs above the beaches. There we were at 3:30 in the morning, struggling down a rope ladder from the deck of a troop ship in a rolling sea into a small boat, an LCI, landing craft infantry, the Army called them, or Higgins boats as they were commonly known, after the man who designed them. The boats held 30 in tight quarters, plus a coxswain and a Navy man. When we got into the boats, we were 10 miles from the Normandy beaches. The wind was blowing hard, the seas were rough, and the waves were cresting over our small boat, drenching everybody, crowded shoulder to shoulder below, in uncomfortable, lonely companionship. Some got seasick, couldn't wait to get off, no matter what came next. We moved up gradually to where we were 3 miles out, and there were the great battleships all around us, shelling the shore, and we would see great flashes of fire, then a moment later, a huge explosion and clouds of yellow and black smoke on the coast. We had 3 regiments in our division, the 115th, which I was in, the 116th, and the 175th. The 116th was to be the first to go in at 6:30 a.m., followed by the 115th a half hour later. The 175th was in reserve. It came in the next day. And alongside us were the 1st Division, the Big Red One, and the 2nd Rangers. And I'd like to recognize David Harrington and his brother. Their father was in the Big Red One on D-Day. I thought it was interesting that they would be here this evening. Our mission was to establish a beachhead, nullify the German guns on the high ground, liberate the small towns along the coast, and seize the coastal roadway so we could get reinforcements and vehicles and tanks and supplies off the ships onto land. The 116th Regiment began the ground assault at 6:30, the appointed time, and they were decimated. All but destroyed, getting off the boats and trying to make their way up the beach. We could see them in their distress. My regiment, the 115th, was then sent in right away instead of waiting that extra half hour.